Keep it up. That was so stupid.
Way to go.
Way to go. We're going to get to the Kings on national TV here in a second. I want to roll back to some JJ Redick stuff. Speaking of entertaining, it's always neat when you see people have to eat words a little bit. Remember, JJ Redick, along with his crew on his podcast, were very, very, very critical of the trade last year, Sabonis Halliburton, from the Kings side. And Redick, really, I got to compliment him here. Great analysis on the Kings. Good to see them getting some notice. He spent quite a bit of time on it. And here's him talking about the first round in the playoffs.
We're going to give a shout and spend some time discussing a couple teams that tend to fly under the radar. One in particular is having a hard time flying under the radar because they're playing so damn well, and that's the Sacramento Kings.
They are extremely fun.
Very fun group to watch.
Extremely fun. They are third in offense. And
I'm sorry, doesn't that have kind of like good times?
Yeah.
Doesn't that have SNL vibes right there?
Yeah. Hey, Pete.
Yeah. Hey, Pete.
Pete Schweddy.
Pete Schweddy.
Yeah.
Love it.
feels sometimes like they should be first in offense when you look at some of the box scores. It seems like they're putting 130, 140 up a night. That beam is lit up.
It's interesting. You said they're third in offense. I actually basically say they're first because Denver's at 117.5 per 100. Boston's at 117.4. They're at 117.3. And then there's a pretty significant drop-off to fourth place. Defensively, still bad, 24th. But they're 24-18. They won last night on the road versus Spurs. They're now in fourth place. They're a game back in the loss column of the Pels, and they're 3 games up in the loss column of the Dallas Mavericks. Very good chance that this team has home court advantage in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs.
It's pretty cool. Very
good chance of home court. Wow. Okay.
I, like most Kings fans, if not all, love hearing stuff like that. I did think, though, what I took more than anything out of that is JJ getting in on some stats.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was incredibly interesting as he looks at the numbers on a couple of the Kings lineups.
Their starting unit, by far, the most 5-man lineup minutes on their team. They've got 119 offensive rating. That's would be league best. They've got a 110.5 defensive rating. That's essentially tied with Philly for would be the 4th best defense in the league.
Okay, there's more to that clip.
But that right there, the starting 5, which plays almost all the minutes,
yeah,
is number 1 offensively, number 4 defensively.
That's insane. And that tells me that might be Mike Brown's biggest weakness so far this year. You got to play all of them 48 minutes.
Yes.
That's the answer.
Yeah, and clone those guys and have them be the bench.
But it gets better.
So that group, by and large, is really good.
I didn't realize they were that good.
I got more.
Interesting.
You sub Davion Mitchell for De'Aaron Fox. That 5-man lineup, even better. That's their second most used lineup. 123.5 insane offensive rating, down to 108.2 defensive, which basically puts them as a top 2 or 3 defense. They're
That's also incredibly interesting. And numbers sometimes can mislead a little bit. Now, in what situation is Davion coming in? Is the other team playing, are a lot of those minutes a lot more coming against the second units for other teams? You can that does not mean, and I don't want anybody to take that as, well, is Davion Mitchell better than
Fox.
Right, exactly. But the point is, no pun intended, you can sub out De'Aaron Fox for a guy off the bench and Davion Mitchell in his second year, and you effectively, he doesn't talk about net rating for that, but I imagine if you're first by a large margin offensively and you're top 2, top 3 defensively, I'm pretty sure that lineup has the best net rating in the league.
Yeah.
With your backup guard and your second best, if not best player, but one of your top 2 players on the bench. All right, JJ.
third most used lineup. You sub Monk for Keegan Murray. Their offense skyrockets to 128. Their defense bottoms out at 118, but still a 10.0 net rating. It's interesting, though. Their next 3 most used lineups all have Sabonis in them, and those lineups are a negative 4.1 rating, a negative 23.3 rating, and a negative 8.1 rating.
Okay. So that, and I can promise you that Monty McNair, this is where Monty and the front office really come in handy in addition to forming a roster. They're not just sitting around scouting college players all year. They're running numbers on everything, and they're breaking them down, not in layman's terms because the coaching staff understands everything, but just they're doing their best to get rid of the noise and present the staff with, okay, look, this hopefully will help Mike and friends with your rotations you've been working on. Now you have some real half of a season data on what does and what isn't working as he continues to, what I would imagine, Jason, get to a point where, I can't believe I'm saying this, as we get towards the stretch run of the season, truncating those rotations, Rick Adelman style, into rotations that work most effectively.
Well, and just hearing those numbers, let's imagine now the Kings in the postseason.
Yes.
Then you're going, okay, it's clear the starting five is impactful. Monk and Mitchell. Like, are you literally going to 7? I feel like there needs to be some numbers with Lyles because he's been playing a lot more lately and they've been doing better. But maybe, with days off between games, sometimes, especially in the first round, remember that's stretched out over 2 weeks. You might have 2 or 3 days off between games. So, hey, you played Fox 42 minutes and Sabonis 42 minutes. Yeah, because they're your 2 best players. And if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. Now, during the season, you kind of have to manage all these guys. But I think as it gets further along, that's something you could really hone in and play your best players the most minutes.
So you and I have arrived at what I think ultimately, and by the way, we don't know what, if anything, Monty's going to do towards the trade deadline. I think it was ESPN put out their trade guide today, and I think their thought was, what was it? It was Len and Terrence Davis. There might have been a second-round pick in there to San Antonio for Josh Richardson. That was their trade idea, who I believe is a free agent next year. I would not mind that. But you're effectively, aren't we kind of both arriving, as for right now, at a 7-man rotation? Obviously, the starting 5, or excuse me, an 8-man rotation. Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, Trey Lyles. There's your 8-man rotation. That is, Rick Adelman employed 7 8-man rotations pretty much through the entire stretch, and the other guys got in blowouts, basically, or if somebody was injured. I don't know that there's anybody off of there, KZ Okpala. Metu's really kind of right now, I think he's the guy, he's the bubble guy. Chimezie Metu is. I'm pretty comfortable, as you are, with Trey Lyles being in that rotation. I think he provides very, very good minutes. You got Mitchell and Monk that give you those backcourt minutes. You have Lyles that gives you those wing backup minutes. But is Chimezie, I think for Monty McNair, is Chimezie Metu. I think they ultimately want an 8-man rotation. I think they ultimately want that 8th person to be your big backup. Is Chimezie Metu the guy you want to take into the stretch of the playoffs as part of that 8-man rotation?
Yeah, I think there's a huge risk there. Chimezie's done some nice things, but he's also been inconsistent. I think there are other better backups in the big spot. But again, what's the net win? What is that going to cost you? If that costs you one of the top 7, I'm not interested.
I agree.
If that's filler on the edges here that you think makes you better, I think that's something you can attack, because I think this chemistry is really, really strong. Even the guys that aren't playing, Dellavedova, Holmes, like just seeing those pictures and the defensive player of the game chain that everybody gets in there and all their swag, and just, I feel like this team is really, really tight, and they're vulnerable if you move a key piece to that.
I think as we go to break, what Monty McNair's quiver has right now, under that circumstance you just brought up, is Terrence Davis, Rashawn Holmes, KZ Okpala, and Chimezie Metu, along with a bunch of second-rounders. And if you really got to do it, you've got first-rounders. I want to say they could go 28, 29 is when they could start. It's got to be 2 years after the latest Atlantis could convey. So if you don't want to mess with that top 7, that's those are the arrows you have in your quiver. Not crazy, but you may find through taking salary or something there may in fact work. We'll take a break. When we come back, a win over the Lakers tonight would be blank. You're going to fill in